Greetings, musicians, drummers, drummer enthusiasts, whoever you might be. Today I want to talk about getting creative with our metronome, right? So, there's a lot of fancy metronomes out there. A lot of them are, rather expensive. They do all sorts of features. Me personally, I just use the Pro Metronome app that's free on the App Store. There is a paid version that gets you a few more features, but I use the light one, and it does everything that I need it to do. But I want to talk about some ways today to make the metronome playing a little more interesting, a little more challenging. A lot of people tend to not like using a metronome. It's almost like the equivalent of, in my opinion, if you have a friend, a good friend, but maybe you all started out not liking each other so much, but then you grew to become closer. That's how a lot of people, I think, feel their relationship with the metronome goes. It's not always fun to work with, if you haven't done it before. But the more you do it, the more you get used to playing with it. So I'm going to talk about today some ways that we can take it a step further and make it a little bit more challenging, maybe give you a tiny bit more of a headache, but when you go back to using it kind of normally, quote unquote, it's so much easier to work with. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna keep it as one beat today that I'm playing. It's the 8th note beat that most people learn in their first drum lesson when they're first starting out. It's just gonna be 8 notes on the hi-hat, quarters on 1 and 3 bass drum, quarters on 2 and 4 snare drum. Just that, right? But we're gonna find some ways to get creative with it using our metronome. So I have it set at quarter note equals 100 right now, if you can see that. Let's actually, for learning purposes, let's even slow that down to 85. How about? So, the first thing that most people do, and understandably so, is treat that as the quarter note on the downbeats of what we just played, right? So, that would sound something like this. 1, 2, count off, and... So what I want to do now is basically shift the metronome over 1/16th note at a time, okay? So now, even though this is 8th note derived, what I'm playing, the metronome is actually going to be on the 16th notes. So it's going to sound, it's going to be specifically on the E 16th note of every beat. So if we're thinking 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a, now it's going to be E and a, E and a, E and a, E and a 1, E and a 2, E and a 3, E and a 4. E and a 1, E and a 2, E and a 3, E and a 4, E and a 1, E and a 2, E and a 3, E and a 4, E and a 4, E and a 4. See how that works? Now it gets a little bit, awkward, right? But again, we want it to be awkward because when we go back to this being on a downbeat, it's going to feel so much easier to work with. Let's try now shifting it one more 16th note. We're going to do it on the ands. And. There we go. Now, let's try it on the uhs. A 1 E, a 2 E, a 3 E, a 4 E, a 1. So in those 4 examples, I was shifting the metronome, right? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the metronome as the downbeat, but I'm going to shift what I play. So now I'm going to play the same beat, the 8th note beat we all know, and I'm going to start it now on the downbeats first, then I'm going to start it on the E, then I'm going to start it on the and then the That'll sound something like this. 3, 4. Now the E's. Back. I always like to go back to the regular downbeat one, kind of as a buffer in the middle of each example. So after the E's, what I just did, so it'll be 3, 4, 1. Now we're back to square one. Now we're going to move it to the ands. Back to square one. Now let's move it to the uhs. One E and now it's going on the ands, the e's, and so on. So you see how you can do both things. You can either shift the metronome relative to what you're doing, or you can shift what you're doing relative to the metronome. By the way, this also, you can do the same idea with triplets. So for instance, if we're doing like the triplet-y version of what I just did, so this is where I'm thinking 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? So it's the first and third of each triplet. Still quarters on 1, 2, 3, 4 over here, obviously. Let's make this metronome now the middle triplet note. So it's like 2, 3, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now let's make it, you guessed it, the third metronome note. 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Last but not least, let's do the same idea now where the metronome is not changing, we're shifting what we play based on the metronome staying steady. So now, you know, back to square one, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I want to move what I'm playing starting on the second triplet note. 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3. Hear that? It gets a little funky. Last but not least, I'll move what I'm playing on the third note. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I'm sorry, let me do that again. 1, 2, 3, 1. There it is. Took me a minute there. You get the idea, right? So all of these shifts make the metronome playing, like I said, in the moment, it's very awkward. But now if I go back to it, just because of all that awkwardness I just went through, that feels a lot more natural. Now if you're like, let's say you're in a studio and you're recording something and people want to record to a metronome, you're never going to ask them, hey, do y'all mind if we play with the metronome on the E instead of the downbeat? It's going to be on the downbeat, right? That's the default. That's the one that, you know, makes things easiest. But with all this other kind of like cerebral stuff we've been doing right now, that's going to make playing with a downbeat metronome, like I said, so much more natural, right? So let me know what you think. Give this a shot. Again, today I just did one beat that we all know, but that just shows you the possibilities with those shifts of metronome. You can obviously do more intricate beats and then shift everything accordingly, right? But for today, that was just the default example, just that first kind of 8-note groove most people learn. So let me know what you think. Thanks as always for watching. Hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.